repeating what the Japanese made. And the Chinese also are being integrated and considered on the first generation. Brazilians are 100%.
I really enjoy talking to you because, to be honest with you, I did not know the future was so positive for China in terms of their energy for cars and the car industry. I just assumed, I don't drive here in China like I did in the States, so I don't know how much the fuel is costing. But, you know, I'm just assuming that, well, I see TV, of course, so I understand. So I was just assuming that they're going to face the very bleak future that so much of the rest of the world does, that is dependent on petroleum, like the U.S., like Europe, and you see these soaring prices, and then you're really at the mercy of the Middle Eastern countries. You know, this is just a dreadful situation. So you don't find China is in a precarious situation like perhaps Europe, which has no source of petroleum on their own, or the U.S. The U.S. has some, but are they in a better position, I guess, this morning?
I think that what you're telling makes a lot of sense in the wars, but I do not think that is a bleak future for China. I do not believe China is a bubble.
I was just going to ask you that. You anticipated it.
But then this discussion came exactly like, what kind of role has China to be in the future on the monetary system, on the economic system? And I think that is the same what we expect from Brazil. We are not anymore emerging economies. We are powerhouses. A country that has the second largest economy in the world could not be emerging.
I know, or even developing. You heard that term about China's a developing country. No, it's developed.
Absolutely. I think that there is no bubble. I just took a train. I was supposed to come from Beijing into Shanghai by plane. But then I decided the last moment I had a dinner in Beijing, and a friend of mine said, "Oh, why don't you take the train? It's a long time." So I took the train, mostly to see the difference in size. So you see that there is not about, you see the towns growing up like mushrooms. You see the new technology, the train stations, and so. You cannot tell China is underdeveloped. It is developed with different areas. Could you imagine the second largest economy of the world that finances part of the so-called developed countries called developing?
But why is that adjective then so often used about China being a developing country or developing economy when it really isn't?
But this is, you recall about a long time ago, I think that was a French intellectual who was sipping his Pernod in Paris and taking some petit vin, and then invented third worlds. And this became something that was, everybody talked during 2 generations about the third world. China, Brazil, all these countries that now are powerhouses.
So is there such thing now as a third world?
I think that today you cannot compare what it was about 25 years ago. If you take Africa, let's imagine, Africa is growing on a compound rate of 5% a year, and are countries that are becoming very, very important on energy, very important minerals, very important. So in education also, they have problems, but they will be overcome. And I am very much positive towards Africa. So you see Russia, China today having the operations here with Vietnam, Thailand, organizing this, even Japan. So I think that these blocks will be consolidated down the road, but we have to rephrase this. There are no more developing countries.
Are there no more third world countries then?
For sure not, and our emerging economies I told the Shenhua, look, we are powerhouses, each one with its capacity, but we are not for sure emerging anymore. My father, my mother thought that I was needing some kind of test to see what I should have done in my life, on my life. So they sent me with a doctor that made all the kind of tests and so on. And so look,
You mean a psychologist?
Yeah, you should have been, you must be an engineer.
So then we can tell all the parents out there that watch this show and wondering about their kids, whether they should take their kids off to a psychologist who does tests about telling them what they should study. Forget it.
Forget about
Save
it.
the money.
Yeah,
Save the money.
On the next Minds of Millionaires, meet Gerwen Yao, chairman of Shanghai Jiahua, the largest homegrown cosmetic company in China.
每个外资企业都犯过错误，因为他们太骄傲了，他们觉得来中国太容易了。其实不稀奇，像我这样的企业，曾经是中国最大的，我92年只能拿出几百万钱打广告，他拿10几个亿打广告。
Jiahua now has a large line of products, including Herbivist, Shanghai Vive, and Liu Shen. This is Mario Garnero, the world-famous Brazilian entrepreneur, considered the visionary who developed the computer, mobile phone, and biofuel industries in his country. He's the founder and chairman of Brazil Invest, Brazil's premier merchant bank responsible for attracting investments of over 12 billion US dollars. As a young man, Mario Garnero was trained as a lawyer, but he never practiced law. Instead, he followed a career path in Brazil in many industries.
You know, you're a very modest man, but in fact you were called the father of ethanol because I believe it was 1980 or 1981 in Brazil there was a petroleum shortage, and you convinced the government to switch over to ethanol, which was really unheard of at that time. And then you were also ahead of the curve because you brought in mobile phone and computer technology. But you're trained as a lawyer. Goes on in your mind when you come up with these innovative thoughts and you're ahead of the curve, which in fact you studied law.
But this is
nothing wrong with being a lawyer. I'm just
no. But this is very, very curious. It's a good question. My father, my mother thought that I was needing some kind of test to see what I should have done in my life, on my life. So they sent me with a doctor that made all the kind of tests and so on. And so look,
you mean a psychologist?
Yeah. You should have been, you must be an engineer. So an engineer, yes. So I went to school, made prepare myself for the university to be an engineer. But then down the road, I thought, okay, I would like to have a more flexible and more humanistic direction on life. And then I turned to be a lawyer, but I never went to a court. And then was involved in business.
You never practiced law,
No.
And you never practiced engineering per se.
I had the best lawyers working for me and the best engineers, but I never tried to compete with them.
So then we can tell all the parents out there that watch this show and wondering about their kids, whether they should take their kids off to a psychologist who does tests about telling them what they should study. Forget it.
Forget about
Save
it.
the money.
Yeah,
Save the money.
And I think that one thing that life has taught me, Nancy, is that to be successful, there's a lucky, perhaps 10%. There's 90% of effort and sweat. But the most important is that you be delighted what you do.
You should be delighted with what you do.
Fortunately, I am. So I see some people waking up every day and telling you, oh, it's a terrible day. It would be complicated. So I do get up very early in the morning, think, oh, what a beautiful day.
Have you always felt that way?
Yes, what a beautiful day. What kind of problems I have to solve during the day. So because you are happy what you do, if you're not happy with what you are doing, better is to leave and start again.
Just leave and start something else.
Start again.
But I wonder, I have two questions for you about this. You say you think life is about 90% of working hard, sweating, preparing yourself, and 10% is luck, and that you wake up every morning and you can't wait to do things. You're excited. But then there is a percentage of everybody whose personality is somehow divided between their parents to some extent. You inherit a basic personality trait, don't you think
Sure.
so?
Oh, for sure, for sure.
And do you think you inherited this optimistic attitude from one or both of your parents?
Yes, my father was born in Italy. He was an engineer and went to Brazil and starts his life over there when he was 27 years old, had participated in the war, had been, was 17 years old, he was on the first war. And from him I worked something that was the constant devotion to work. From my mother, what I got mostly was a sense of mission. You have to accomplish what you start, and you have to be prepared to be perhaps using what the Chinese have as a say. If you fall 3 times, get up 4. And this is what perhaps I learned on that. Genetically, I could not explain. Perhaps the DNA has given a little of those points that my parents had.
Well, you certainly have been blessed with good genes. Once this is done, I wonder if I can quote something that you said at an MIT Brazil Invest conference. You were talking about tech-intensive societies, of which you have been very active in. And again, I have to say, ahead of the curve. And you said, this is not only about hard science and math and technology, but especially about management. In today's world, management comes before capital. What did you mean when you said that? I mean, I understand literally, but what did you mean?
When you have a good management, he raised money in the States. He has a good idea and could prove that, he raised money. When is a failure on the business, mostly is because the man that was ahead of that was not able enough to prevent a failure.
I'm thinking in terms of management, and I'd like you to speak to this here in China on 2 levels. In China, just like it seems in the rest of the world, the most popular graduate degree is almost profoundly much higher for an MBA, as you know. And that's the same in the US, it's the same in Europe, it's the same everywhere. I have a great worry that there's going to be a plethora of college kids that graduate with MBAs and no jobs for them because there'll be too many of them. But having said that, there's also a big issue about middle management in China. And I've read a lot about that. How particularly domestic companies, but let's just talk about multinationals, were putting their own people in and couldn't find enough middle management here in China because MBAs are rather a new concept. And now they're making a real push because multinationals would be much happier having their middle management Chinese.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, that's just way ahead. So what do you think about all that? I mean, do you think there'll be too many MBAs in the future?
I think that will be too many MBAs diverted into managers and not being
banking and finance.
But
that's a good thing, though, isn't it?
No, but a very, very interesting point that you are telling. Chinese are today making about 300,000 engineers per year forming here. The States is far behind. But the Chinese are sending only to the States 120,000 people per year, students to be there. And of course, the productivity of the industry in the future will depend exactly on the middle management. So you would be progressively having the market to offer better salaries for engineers, better for middle management. And then it will be attracting the guys that are thinking that the MBA, and everybody would like to go at MBA because, oh, I made an IPO. Oh, I got fantastic. But when they go to Wall Street, for instance, today, and you see the quantity of people that was dismissed, lost
during the financial
jobs.
crisis
For
in the
sure,
2008.
For sure. And you are right, they are not so productive because we're not trained to be there.
So as a cautionary tale, and if you were to come to the U.S., particularly in 2008, you would find a whole lot of unemployed MBAs and underemployed, taking virtually any job. So given that our show is watched by a lot of college kids, a lot of graduate students, and their parents, and high school kids, and they're really making decisions about their life, what would you say to them given your background? I mean, you have a great sense because you deal with global economies. What would you say to them if they weren't going to do an MBA? What would be something that you see as even a more viable career to have here in China?
I would say that it's very easy for them to have the temptation to have the MBA. MBA, he will be not rich. The question of making IPOs does privilege someone that has a very, very great knowledge and has had also the opportunities that are being today more and more difficult. So I think that for these young kids, what I would suggest is just to see the curves of growth of the industry, of the commerce, trade. It's something that will become very important.
And you don't need an MBA to be at the top of the game on trade.
No, for sure not.
In fact, a lot of international studies would be logical.
For sure. I think that the most important is to see what you would be doing in the future. And perhaps we could come back to it. He has to think after getting the studies and get the first job, if he's happy with that. Otherwise, he would be leaving this and searching another opportunity. And it would be, at this time, a little bit late.
Wouldn't you advise all college kids, when they graduate, not to go to graduate school right away? In fact, in the U.S. and all the management business schools here, they want those college graduates to go off and work. It used to be you'd apply and go right from undergraduate to a business school.
Yeah.
Now they're saying they don't even really want to look at an application like that. They want you to go to work for 3 to 5 years, Mario.
Yeah, and then
that seems like such a long time.
Long time, yeah. And 3 or 5 years when they are forming their views of the world. And then to come back is much more complicated than from the start from anew. So I think that is a good point. I think that there is a time of thinking and to decide, not making the psychological test that I made I just demoralized the test, but having a sort of decision based